I'm Kristen, and you're listening to Podcast and Amplify, a podcast for women entrepreneurs who want to amplify their voice and brand through podcasting and grow a wildly successful business. I'm the executive producer and host of 2 shows and an entrepreneur, and I love helping women grow their visibility, mindset, and business to the next level. Each week, I share tips on how to launch and leverage your podcast, and I'm bringing on the very best business leaders to give you advice on how to build your business empire. Let's amplify your voice and business. Welcome back to Podcast and Amplify. I'm your host, Kristen, and this is the final episode of 2022 and of season 3. And I wanted to do a wrap up, sort of my hot takes, my learnings and growth and accomplishments and failures and all the good things that happened over this last year, both on the podcast and inside Podcast and Amplify. So let's dive in. Let's just start with the wins. So some of the things that went really well this year are my sponsorship program, which I launched a year after having this podcast. And I'm really excited that it was so successful and that I sold out every single spot. I really attribute this to my community, my love of building relationships and building community, because every single person that signed up for an ad spot, they are part of my community. They're people who I just would have talked about anyways, had they not paid me. And that was really important to me. You know, if I'm going to do ads, bring businesses that I genuinely care about, that I believe in, and that I know will provide value for you. So that was a really successful thing that happened this year, successful program. And I'm looking forward to continuing that into next year. I already have a few people I've been speaking to sponsor the show in 2023. And I have to say, just a little bit of behind the scenes, I really felt some imposter syndrome around putting my sponsorship offer out there. There was a part of me that was like, okay, your show is not this huge, massive show. You know, it's still small, but it's growing, and it's growing at a steady pace. And you have a great, loyal audience, and it's not this huge show. So there was a big part of me that was like, well, who's going to want to buy ad spots? Who's going to want to, advertise on my show? And so I really had to work through some of that imposter syndrome, some of that sort of limiting myself before I even gave it a chance. And I'm so glad that I did. But I know that's something that's very common in business. And even in our personal lives, sometimes we can talk ourselves out of something before even trying. And it was actually a webinar that I attended around podcast sponsorships that really helped me see the value that my podcast brings to any sponsorship, to any guest, because it's not just about the podcast, it's about the community that I've built around this podcast. And it's not just the podcast episode, it's being able to offer promotion on all these other platforms, in my newsletter, on my social media feeds, on my website. So I do have a lot of places to share about the sponsor. And so I just want to share that with you, because if you have a podcast and you're thinking, oh, it's so small, or you don't have a podcast, this will help get you thinking about how to see your podcast and the value that it will bring you. But just knowing that you have a whole sort of ecosystem in how you put out content that is really valuable to potential sponsors. So that was something I kind of had to work through. And I'm so glad that I did, because making the podcast profitable, or at least have some income from it, was always one of my original goals. So that was something that I accomplished this year that I'm really happy that I did. Another huge accomplishment for me, and I think you've heard me talk about this, is how I was able to use this podcast along with coaching to get on a national stage and speak on a national stage. And this is so important for me because I never saw myself as speaking in front of people. Even the podcast, when I first started my podcast in 2020, I was just so uncomfortable being in the spotlight. And I always have been. It's not my favorite place to be. But there was a little voice in me that was like, I don't know if it's about speaking in front of people. I think there's something else there because speaking is a skill. Anyone can learn how to speak in front of people, how to improve those skills. And so I had this little inkling inside of me that like, oh, I think it's like what you're talking about. And these past years of being an entrepreneur, I've had to show up and talk about my business in so many different ways. And my business is very mission driven. My purpose is to amplify diverse voices and be profitable. But that's a really heartfelt mission that's so connected to me and what I believe in and what I'm passionate about. So I've had to talk about it in so many different places online. And I realized that when I'm talking about that, it feels so organic. It feels so natural and easy and exciting. And I'm not so concerned with what are people thinking of me? How am I coming off to others? And, everyone's looking at me. So what I realized was I really need to be connected to my message. And I found a way to do that. And that was like getting to the mountaintop. And I really felt like after I spoke on that stage, like, was it perfect? No. I was able to watch back and I saw different ways that I could improve, but I was also really like compassionate to myself. And I was like, you know what? For this being your first time, not bad. Good job. Like you did as well as you could with the experience and the knowledge that you have, and you have room to grow. And that's totally fine. Like I really didn't feel like I wasted anyone's time, which would have been the most devastating to me if I didn't feel like I gave value. And so I know 100% that I gave value and that people connected to what I said. I had people coming to me, asking me questions, and I booked a podcast episode on someone's podcast right then and there after the talk. So I know it provided value. And as long as I did that, I was good. The other part of like, okay, was I moving around the stage? No. Was I maybe as charismatic or was I as comfortable as I wanted to be? No, not yet. But I did as well as I could. And those are things that I can always improve on. So that was a huge turning point for me. I really felt like after that, oh man, there's nothing I can't do. And so I hope that you've had some moments of that feeling this year. I really wish that for you, that you did something in 2022 that was a big deal for you and that stretched you and challenged you and proved to yourself that you can do anything. Because it's the best feeling. And I know you can do anything. I know my listeners can do anything that they put their mind to because I have so many smart, talented, amazing women who tune in and listen to this show each week. And so if you didn't have as many of those moments that you wanted to in 2022, it's a great goal to set for 2023 to kind of start thinking about, where are the places that I really want to stretch and grow? And then so rounding out the end of this year, I mean, there's a lot of things that happened I could talk about, but I'm trying to keep this brief and to the point. And so one of the last things that I did just a week ago was I finally published this article that I'm thinking about and working on for some time. It took me longer than I thought it would. And so I finally published my article on thought leadership called Rethinking Thought Leadership and Who Gets to Lead. And I think it took me so long because I really believe in this topic, in helping as many people as possible to see themselves as leaders and to honor that voice that they have inside them saying, I have something to say. And I know from experience that the idea of a thought leader can be very exclusive. It doesn't always invite in different perspectives, different experiences. And so I'm really passionate about helping more people to see themselves as having a leading voice, having forward-thinking ideas, and sharing those, because ideas come from a lot of different places. The world is a challenge right now, and we really can't afford everything that's going on. We really can't afford to not tap into different types of knowledge, different ways of seeing things. And I'm so passionate about, it not just being about what you know, but also being about those other things that are so important that make us wise, and tapping into, being leaders that help other people feel seen and sort of take us on that journey and inspire us to actually take action, and inspiring people to actually be those agents of change and not sort of just put out ideas and let's just talk about them, which was what I was used to in my corporate world. It was like, let's just publish this article that sounds good and it sounds like it's groundbreaking, but it's really not. And the people behind it weren't really creating any change. We have so many people actively changing the world to be how they want it to be. And we need to hear from them. And I 100% believe that. And I attended a workshop inside Success Revolution Society, which I will talk about next. And it was about tapping into your voice, and the workshop leader was excellent. And what she really helped me realize in that workshop was it's not just about hearing from more voices, but when you give that mic to other people, you're helping to shift power dynamics, because so much about thought leadership has been very hierarchical. And when you can start to look at leaders differently and be more inclusive and be more accepting that leadership is going to look different, it's going to be diverse, that's when you give people more power. You start distributing that power and taking it away from people who have historically been seen as the only ones who, quote unquote, should have power. And so I just love this topic. It's something that I'll be talking about more. I've created a training around it, which I hope to do inside companies next year. And so that's kind of on the horizon for me. And then finally, the last thing I'll talk about in terms of wins for last year was joining Success Revolution Society. I had been looking for a community of smart, kind, genuine women, and I absolutely found it. This community is everything that I was hoping for and more. And enrollment happening right now. I'm not paid to say this at all. I just love the group so much that I love talking about it. And it was a real win for me, because this is something that I have been looking for, and I have felt so supported and just gotten so much out of the group. And so that was a real win for me. And so if that's something that you're looking for, then reach out to me and we can chat about that. Okay, let's talk about some things that didn't work so well. Okay, so let's talk about some things that didn't go so well this year. And I love talking about mistakes or quote unquote failures, because I think there's a lot to learn from those experiences. This year, I finally decided that I am no longer going to do the traditional launch. Launches just don't work for me, where it's like super hyped up, intense for 2 weeks, and it's all building up and leading up. And it's like so many emails you're sending to your community leading up to an event. And it's just the whole thing. I hate it. And I even tried to modify it, but launches just aren't my jam. So you really won't see me launching here. I've tried doing it so many different ways. In fact, I was in the middle of a launch when my coach and I decided that I needed to pull the plug, because it just was not working. It was making me feel really just misaligned. And so I haven't decided what else I'm going to do in place of that, but I've decided that, launching is just not for me, and that's okay. I can figure out a way to reach out to people and give value in so many other ways. And that's just one. So I want to share this example of something not going well with you because I want to encourage you to, give yourself permission to just not do something, even though everyone else says it's the way to do it. But if it doesn't feel right for you, that means it's not right for you. And so to kind of keep forcing it and, not get the results that you want, I just think that there are other ways to figure out how to build your community, get leads. And so if there's something that you're doing that you really don't love, hopefully you hear this and know that you can just let it go and figure out another way. And so another thing that I'm really trying to work on still, and it kind of really only clicked in the last quarter of this year, was not making myself wrong. I was still struggling with doing that. And so that made it really hard to have sort of like a problem-solving mindset and being optimistic. And so I really have been working on, like, when something goes wrong, not making it about me and what I'm not doing or how I'm not enough, and really just thinking about, okay, that's a problem to be solved. That's a hurdle to figure out how to go over, under, or around. And we can do this. So having that optimistic attitude of like, we can do this instead of this sucks and it's never going to happen. So that was a mindset shift that I've been working on really hard this last few months of the year. I think I've done a much better job. I've known that I've needed to shift my mindset in that way, but it just hadn't clicked before, and it finally has. And so I feel like I'm definitely on a sort of uptrend in terms of having that real like CEO mindset of like, everything's just a problem to be solved. And I'm really liking it. It's really making me feel like things can be accomplished. So what that's looked like in my business is, well, I talked about it a little bit with sponsorships. So being more optimistic about, yeah, of course, people are going to want to sponsor your show, or pitching to other podcasts to be a guest on their show, or pitching to speaking engagements. There were definitely times where I would kind of get in a funk and be like, they're not going to say yes. Why would they choose me? So really kind of turning that around. So that's what helped me start the sponsorship program. That's what helped me pitch to podcasts to be a guest, and getting yeses within like minutes, getting people saying, thank you so much for a great pitch, and putting myself out there for speaking opportunities, letting people know that's what I'm available for, having people in my community send me opportunities to pitch to, saying, hey, I think you'd be great for this. It's just been really great for me to see that, when you open up your mind to possibilities and sort of don't cut them off before you even give them a chance, that a lot of things will come your way. And I'm very good at action, but my mindset can definitely hold me back. And I know I will get to the action part, but what I'm finding is that I'm getting to the action part sooner because I'm doing less of the mind drama before getting to the action. So that's a really great shift for me. And I hope that you can see how sometimes our mindset can still hold us back, even if we've been doing so much work on ourselves. Someone told me the other day, it's like an onion. It's like you might have worked on something, but then you pull off that layer and there's like a different version of what you thought you sort of worked through underneath. And then you have to kind of like work on that, which is totally okay. We all have lifelong work that we're going to have to do, and this happens to be mine. So maybe something for you, if you've been dealing with this yourself, something to focus on for 2023 might be having that possibility mindset, not making yourself wrong, and just really looking at problems as things that can be solved, instances where you can be creative. And I think it's just been so helpful for me in my business this year. I've seen a lot of shifts and a lot of things happen. So finally, I want to talk about where I'm sort of doubling down in my business this year. I am going to be focusing more on my VIP intensive and doing my audits. So VIP intensives are for people who have not started their podcast yet, but you want one-on-one coaching and assistance throughout that whole process to start it and launch it. I am a natural collaborator and creative. And so are podcasts. Podcasts are a very collaborative medium. And that's actually what you will need to do to grow your podcast. You will need to collaborate with other podcasts, whether that's being on their podcasts and them being on yours to help grow your audience, doing swaps, promo swaps, or freebie swaps, or just so many opportunities to collaborate. And so it's really a great way to start your podcast, being in this sort of co-collaborative space with someone who really knows your mission, your goals, and helps you make that a reality. And so that's what I'm going to really focus on this year in terms of working with clients. And then I also love doing the audits. So this is for someone who already has a podcast. Maybe you started it on your own, didn't quite know what you were doing, or you felt confident about what you were doing, but now you're like, how do I take this to the next level? What can I do with this podcast and how can I get more listeners? That's something that I can help you with in terms of doing your audit and showing you like, where are the gaps? What are you missing? And giving you that feedback and that information. You get an optimization plan. So next year, I'm focusing on these two offers because I really want to work with people in a way that lights me up and in a way that utilizes all of my skills in the best possible way. So the last thing I'll talk about in terms of the programs and services I provide is my latest free offer, which is the Purposeful and Profitable Podcast Clarity and Strategy Coaching Session. This is a 30-minute session where we look at clarifying your podcast vision, the mindset and the strategies and actionable next steps that you'll need to create that really purposeful and profitable podcast. So we'll dive into that for 30 minutes. You'll get to ask me any questions and I'll give you that very specific feedback. And this is something that I had thought about, but I just kind of couldn't wrap my brain around it. I'm not sure why it was so hard, but I spoke with a coach recently and I was like, yeah, why am I not doing this? This is such a no-brainer. I love working with people one-on-one. I love coaching. And to be able to give you this 30-minute coaching session just feels so great. It feels so fun. And I'm really excited to offer this to anyone who wants to book this consultation, who's thinking about starting a podcast or who has a podcast. And this is an absolutely no pitch, no pressure consultation. So I'm someone who really needs to process things. So this is designed to just be a really supportive space where we get to connect and talk about your podcast goals. So if that's something that you are interested in, go ahead and go to my website. And actually, I'll put a link in the show notes where you can book a free coaching session. I'm really excited, like I said, to offer this to this community. And that's it for this episode. So we talked about the accomplishments, the sort of missteps this year, the evolutions a little bit, where I'm going to be focusing my services next year, and a little bit about where I'm going to be focusing the podcast and the new free offer that you can take advantage of by clicking on the link in the show notes. And just a reminder, season 4 of Podcast and Amplify will start back up in March. March 1st, we'll release our first episode, but in between the end of December and March, you can expect some bonus episodes. And so look for those. And if you're not on my email list, get on my email list. That way, you know when those bonus episodes drop and you don't miss them. And then also another way to ensure that you don't miss the episodes is by subscribing to this podcast. I absolutely loved season 3 of the podcast. I mean, we talked about joyful goals. We talked about your intuition in your business, embracing your imperfect journey, human design, setting boundaries, redefining leadership, how to create real community. We talked about the science behind storytelling, curating your life, why women need to be more selfish. We talked a little bit about getting debt-free because money is so important. And of course, we talked about elevating your self-concept, managing your mindset. And so those were just some of the topics that we got into this season with our guests. And then as far as my solo episodes, I talked about leveraging your podcast for speaking opportunities, why you should attend a podcasting conference, how to become a thought leader by podcasting, how to expand your network by podcasting, how to help your listeners feel seen, producing a podcast while honoring your capacity. So I hope that these episodes were helpful for you and that you make sure to tune in next season, next year. And thank you so much for listening to this show. It means so much to me. I love creating this show for you all. It is absolutely my joy and what lights me up. And I am just so grateful that all of you listen and tune in every week. And so I really hope you have a beautiful end of the year and that you get some relaxation, some rejuvenation, have some fun and adventure, and connect with your community and loved ones. So thank you again for being a part of my community. And that's all I have for you this season. So thanks again and take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of Podcast and Amplify. If you love the show, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And the best way to support this show is by sharing, rating, and reviewing the podcast. For those of you who leave a review, you'll get the chance to win a 30-minute strategy session or a mini audit of your existing podcast. Thanks for listening, and remember, your voice and what you have to offer is needed in the world. Until next week, take care.